What things have happened at your jobs that you just did not think were possible? A few cool car dealer stories from past employment. First, crappy dealer I worked for, the lot porter was doing inventory on the lot and moving new cars around. They use those lock boxes that you roll the window up on so the keys are with the car. They couldn't get the lockbox open. They then run the VIN on inventory and find that they never took delivery of the car. Yep, there it was. 1 hour later, I find out the car was reported stolen from a dealer 200 miles away. Someone stole the car, drove to my town, parked it on the lot, and left it where it sat for over 1 month. Second, great dealership I worked at. A couple comes in and takes a car for a test drive. Some people are gone for 10 to 15 minutes, 30 minutes tops. Salesman called the cell phone number, no answer. 1 hour, 2 hours, 5 hours, nothing. At the end of the day, the sales department calls police to report the car stolen, only to be told it isn't stolen because we gave them the car to test drive and it didn't put a time or distance limit on the car. The car is returned the next morning with 500-ish miles on it and an empty tank. Never saw the couple again. Third, a service department manager comes in one morning and sees a customer's car in the parking lot on a jack with the wheel missing. Crap, someone stole a wheel. Odd, just one rim was stolen. Towards the end of the day, someone sees a guy putting the wheel back on the car. Turns out some random guy had a blowout on his car, walked down the road during the night and took a random wheel off a car, put it on his car. Then later on in the day, he got a new tire for his car and came back to return the borrowed wheel he took. Okay, so the guy in number 3 was at least decent enough to return the wheel. Story 2. A friend and I were driving to a meeting late one night, or early one morning if you want to look at it that way, when we got caught in a terrible blizzard in unfamiliar territory. My friend was driving very slowly through the whiteout conditions, trying to find a safe spot to pull off the road. We ended up sliding down this massive hill with absolutely no control. At the bottom of the hill, we slammed sideways into the curb and badly damaged both rims on the driver's side. So here we are in a blizzard in the middle of nowhere, almost out of gas with a busted ride. Oh, and did I mention this was before cell phones were even remotely common? Then, through the snow, we see a sign for something. We brave the cold to see what it is, and if they have a phone we could use. Unfortunately, it was a car dealership, so we hatched our brilliant plan and stole 2 wheels from a display car and left a note explaining our distress and that we would return with payment. We managed to make it into town and found a hotel before we found a gas station. The next morning, we couldn't get the damn car started because it was out of gas. Spent an entire day trying to get a tow truck. A small town had 2 trucks, both were booked solid because of the blizzard. It wasn't until the next day that we returned to the dealership to pay whatever they asked for the wheels, honestly expecting to be arrested. Turns out the guys hadn't noticed that things were even gone since some nearby trees had blown over in the storm and damaged a bunch of cars. They were already in the process of submitting an insurance claim for the damages and just had a laugh with us and told us not to worry about paying. Good times, except for the almost freezing part. Story 3. Well, on a more positive note, I'm in college to become a special education teacher, but I currently work part-time in a special education classroom as a paraprofessional. We had a 6-year-old girl with autism last year, the sweetest kid in the world, but she didn't speak. Her mom had given up and eventually she split and left her daughter in foster care. Luckily, a foster family in the area took her, so we were able to continue working. She was working well with a speech device and that was enough for her teacher, but not for me. I tried to get her to speak at every opportunity. June rolls around and it's the last 2 weeks of school. She's come a long way and done so much, but still hasn't said a word in her life. We're outside playing in the grass and I ask her, "Jane, what's your favorite color?" I expected the mechanical voice at the touchpad, but instead she deliberately pointed to the sky and said, "Blue." I cried, the other paraprofessional cried, and we called her foster parents so they could cry too. We never dreamed that would happen, but it did. She's doing very well this year and has a vocabulary of about 20 words. I babysat for her over the summer and her 5th word was friend, in reference to me. Story 4. I work at a Shari's restaurant, which is basically like a regional IHOP in the PNW. In our front display case with fresh pies, we also had a tray of caramel pecan cinnamon rolls that were just at least 4 years old because they were sprayed with food preservatives and other stuff. They were calcified and hardened, impossible to do anything with. Apparently, we had a host, was eventually fired for good reason, that sold one of those rolls to a customer. A lady asked him for a roll and pointed at the one in the display case. Instead of telling her that those rolls were for display purposes only, he apparently took the tray into the back of the kitchen, How no one noticed is beyond me, and went at it with a steak utensil and God knows what else. He boxes the roll up, sells it to the lady. Meanwhile, no one has noticed that the tray of rolls in the front display case is gone. Several hours later, this lady calls back and demands to speak with the manager. Apparently, she has no idea what she was supposed to do with this quote unquote fossil. Was she supposed to call the health department, the police, or what? I don't think she tried to eat it, though reportedly she microwaved it and it started smoking. Needless to say, we gave her a full refund as well as a free pack of cinnamon rolls. You think the guy cutting into it would have realized that if it takes that much effort to cut into the rolls, there's probably something amiss. Story 5. A pair of teenage girls sat at the bar and tried to order drinks. The bartender, who was my friend and coworker, asked to see some ID. They provided a student ID. He demurred. One of the girls leapt to her feet and yelled, "Hey everyone, this bar wants service." Whereupon she delivered a dramatic kiss to the other girl and they stormed out, never to return. Until a week later when they came back and rather ostentatiously occupied a bathroom stall for an hour. A man ordered a glass of wine and upon being informed that we did not carry wines, proceeded to rail for 15 minutes about how we were violating his rights. He then stormed out. 3 minutes later, management comes out front with an email from corporate about how we had cruelly tormented some poor, innocent soul who only wanted a wee dram of wine. Half the customers at the bar laughs up and management begins to understand what happened. We look outside and there he is in the parking lot glaring at us over the lid of his laptop. A customer was told that we would not be serving him any more drinks. "Fine," he says. "Then I'll just take these." And with that, he scooped up an entire armload of frozen mugs from the freezer and staggered out, leaving a trail of shattered glassware across the parking lot. After dumping these surviving glasses in the trunk of his car, he staggered back in and sat back down at the bar to order another drink. The bartender, impressed by the sheer chutzpah display, gave it to him and called the cab to haul his back home. On his way out, he ripped a fiberglass alligator off the wall. A Togo order came back with a vinyl glove and a tin of pasta. The customer was irate and went directly to management. I was in charge of packing up to-go food that night, and management came to me with a shade of red normally reserved for flowers and sports cars. Up and down, he swore at me, demanding to know how I could have let something like that past me. Did I not check the food? Was that not the part of my job, my reason for being there? "Boss," said I, holding the offending object up with the tip of a pencil, "our gloves aren't blue." He shuffled out and didn't make eye contact for a week. The customer's food was comped anyway. Story 6. A few years ago, I was an assistant store manager at Kroger. Yes, I'm telling you who it was because they were so horrible. I witnessed the following. Employees putting their cigarettes out in the sanitation sinks for washing trays your food goes into in the meat department. Employees icing coffee cakes with their bare hands, just sticking their hands with rings on into the tubs of icing and drizzling the icing over the coffee cakes. The store manager saying, "We already have one piece of crap woman on the night crew. We certainly don't need another," as a reason that he would not approve our HR coordinator hiring another female to stock shelves. What is worse is that she and I had a meeting with corporate HR on it, and rather than investigate, look at hiring records or anything, they accused us of trying to take him down so one of us could get his job, which isn't true because even if he was let go, one of the managers of the smaller stores would have taken over our store. Employees redating food that was expired already. Numerous health code violations. You would think that as a manager, I could have done something about this, but no. I was told to apologize to the employee that I wrote up for icing coffee cakes with her hands, and was informed if I ever did that to such a good woman, again, that I would be asked to leave the store. I was looking for another job the entire time I worked there, but eventually quit before finding one due to HR telling me I was trying to bring my boss down. 2 months later, I found a great job. I will never buy anything from a Kroger again, and after hearing some of my stories, neither will some of my friends. Story 7. I was working in the sporting goods department of a very large retail chain that sells weapons. A man and his SO come to the counter and tell me they wish to purchase a rifle. After inspecting it, he declares that he would like to purchase it. I file the normal paperwork and call the FBI hotline, only to find out that he's a convicted felon. I inform him that there was an issue and I can't sell this to him. I gave him the hotline number and the request code, which is SOP for the store chain. He tells me that his wife will purchase it. I tell him that that is not an option because she was with him during his attempt to buy a firearm per the law. He then asks for 2 machetes out of the case. He's very upset at this point, so tell him I need my manager's approval for the sale. I called the manager over, and the guy went ballistic on the manager because I wouldn't sell him the machete without approval. The manager sells them to him and writes me up for poor customer service. I hate retail. Story 8. I worked in a Kroger fuel center once. There wasn't much for me to have sanitation issues with, but it was still an awful experience. No one would come to give me breaks. I would call the store and inform them that someone needed to come replace me for a break, and then they would tell me they were too busy. Then I would be written up for not taking a break. When I quit, I had around 50 write-ups for not taking breaks. I was never trained for handling an oil spill. One day, a bus rolls in, leaking gas everywhere and creating a nice big puddle. I have no idea what I'm supposed to do. I call my manager, and her response is, "It's a gas station. Some gas on the ground is fine." And one day, there was a terrible smell. It was kind of like a lemon scent, but much sharper with a tinge of new electronic smell. I called my manager and was told to quit whining. I spent the day outside the booth, only going in for transactions because I was scared of it. The person who replaced me after my shift was burned when a battery, an emergency battery for the lights, exploded. That's where the smell was coming from, apparently. One day, I desperately had to use the bathroom. Alas, no toilet in the booth. I called up to the store to get someone to replace me for a bit. That was when my manager informed me of the Gatorade bottle behind the counter that I was supposed to use in that situation. Yep, a terrible place to work. Story 9. I'm a bank teller, and one day when balancing out my drawer, I came up $30 short. Our policy says any outage over $25, long or short, results in a write-up. I was looking frantically, hoping to find it. I've only been at my job for 3 months. I didn't want to be written up. After 30 minutes of searching every possible reason for why I would be short $30, I pulled what my computer read for my tills. It said I had $980 in 50s. $980 in $50 bills. I brought this to the attention of my boss so we could correct it. She confirmed that that was the reason I was short. Story 10. I used to work at Sears back in college, and we were on commission in lawn and garden. One month we had a massive storm with trees down all over town. Some people were looking at weeks to get out of the driveways, etc., if they waited in the city to clear. So they would get out onto a main road and get a ride down to our place, figuring they'd buy some chains to yank the tree out of the way, or a chainsaw to cut it up, or something equally imminently reasonable, in theory. Once they got home, they realized their Honda Civic wasn't going to pull that 40-foot tree anywhere, or that they didn't actually know how to use a chainsaw, blade oil, fuel mixture, etc. The city was actually incredibly good at getting stuff cleared, so most of this got returned to me. I think we had a 1-month window where it could take our commission back. So I come into work and clock in that weekend, and I'm something like minus $1,500 on my numbers. No one had ever seen someone start that much in the hole on a single day. Worst day of my retail career. Story 11. Well, one day I was walking into work and I found a piece of paper on the ground. I went to reach for it and ended up getting a paper cut. I thought, well, that's not good. Now it's going to be irritating all day. So I got into work, and as I'm climbing the stairs, wouldn't you know it, I tripped and hurt my shin. I thought, well, this just isn't my lucky day. So I go to the bathroom and clean up the scrape. As I'm walking out, I slip and hit my head. Now I have a paper cut, a bad knee, and a huge bump on my forehead. And I think, wow, I don't know how this day will get any worse. So I go to my desk and do some work. Then I realize I need to go copy something. Now, as I'm copying, I lean over into the paper intake, and wouldn't you know, it takes up my tie and rips it off clean. That was my favorite tie. I go sit down in defeat at my desk and realize that this day is just terrible. I continue my work but don't get much done all day. And it's almost the end of the day, and I get a letter. I reach for my letter opener and start opening the letter, and wouldn't you know it, it slips and hurts my thumb. I think, well, there's a hospital right across the street. I think I'll walk. And as I walk over, I trip on the curb and fall into the street. I stumble and get back on my feet, but it's too late. Some dumb teenage girl isn't paying attention to the road and slams right into me. All I can think of at that point is, well, accidents happen. You know, they say what doesn't end you makes you stronger. I'm not sure what this day has made him, but it certainly hasn't made him lucky. Story 12. I work at a frozen yogurt shop, so people are usually happy when they come into the store, which means, unlike my old job at McDonald's, that it's a mostly bearable place to work. One afternoon, the shop is moderately busy. A man comes in, jokes around with my coworker. asks her if he can leave a bag behind the counter for like 10 minutes. She says yes. He leaves the bag, a backpack, and goes. 5 minutes later, my coworker is counting the drawer, and I'm out front, having missed a whole first exchange. A woman at least 10 to 15 years older than him comes in and says, "My husband left a bag behind the counter. I just need to put something in it, and I'll bring it right back." This is a little odd, but she can't see the bag from the front of the shop, so she had to have known it was there, and I saw her come in from across the parking lot, so she couldn't have been watching the man's and my coworker's exchange. So I say sure. She takes a bag and goes over to a table, and I help a customer, so I just hear her say thanks and put the bag back. Then she goes to the bathroom and then gets some yogurt. Then 10 or so minutes later, she's still back by the yogurt machine. The man comes back in and he's furious. The first thing he says when he comes in the door across the store is, "You witch." It's low in tone but venomous, and the woman clearly hears it. She says something else back and moves towards the front of the store. They argue for a moment, really viciously but with a low volume, and I hear him say some words a few times, and then he grabs her arm, drags her back to the counter, and grabs a bag. Now, this guy is much younger than the lady and bigger and built, so I wasn't sure if he was her husband or some sketchy dude. Remember, I was in the back when he came in the first time. I say, "Excuse me," but they're arguing again, and this time she hurts him across the face, and the volume of the argument is rising. I'm still not sure if this dude is stealing the bag or what, and so as they start to leave, I say more loudly, "Excuse me." The man turns around, snarls, "Get stuffed, witch," quite loudly in front of my 15 other customers and leaves. An old man in line to be rung up goes, "Hey," and some college kids who just paid stand up from their chairs. A moment later, the wife of the old man says, "Hold on to these, we're just going to go check on that," and hands me their yogurt, and she, the old man, and the college kids go out and roughen the guy up in the parking lot. Like, first they're all lecturing him, and then he goes to hurt the old man, and the college kids get him in a lock and are talking really lowly to him, and the old man says something, and the man goes really pale, and they let him go. Then they say something to the woman, who goes equally pale, and come back inside and pay for their yogurt like they didn't just lay down the smack in the parking lot. Story 13. I used to work as an off-phone rep for a local telco. My job consisted mostly of answering customer emails and providing information from the billing system to other departments that didn't have access or training to use the software. The vast majority of emails we received contained requests that we couldn't perform by email, such as name changes, service changes, or anything that required validating the emailer's identity. I point out that we didn't do it to be mean. We had just been sued over making changes via email for a disgruntled ex-wife trying to mess with her ex-husband. We didn't have a way to verify identity to a degree that pleased the court. Since most of these emails required us to call them or for them to call us, I wrote a macro that would let me tag those emails and bomb them out with a form letter. It would also drop their name and a callback queue for the CSRs if they weren't completely swamped. This process used to take off-phone reps about a minute or two per email. Typically, a rep would complete 30 emails an hour, 45 if you're really speed reading. The day I implemented the macro, I hit 287 emails in an hour. After taking some time to analyze common words and template response emails with a different tool, I later boosted my throughput to 6,200 emails a shift while still running errands for legal and other departments. My manager's manager went crazy when he saw our metrics. This also inadvertently led to most of the off-phone reps going back on the phone. About the same time, I was moved to a different department that needed some automation in its workflow, so I didn't see much of their scowls. Story 14. I used to manage a copy and print department, and one day I had this very innocent-looking 70-ish-year-old lady come in. She had me copy several covers to cleaning repair manuals for various weapons. Now, this wasn't too out of the ordinary since my store was the closest copy place to our county fairgrounds where, in the Midwest, we have gun shows about every month. Less than a week later, she came back with a slightly odder print job, covers for about a half dozen homemade explosive manuals, tactical tags for maps, marking IEDs, enemy-friendly units, rally and objective points, etc., and detailed maps of our local Air Force base. Clearly, this sent up a few red flags, but for some reason, refusing to copy them for her just didn't seem safe. After she left, I notified my regional manager and the FBI. 2 agents were at my store in less than 15 minutes, and they ghosted and erased a hard drive on my copiers, and I spent the next 2 hours answering questions. I got a call from one of the agents a few days later with a few final questions and the standard, "Thanks for doing this service to your country." Never did hear anything related to this incident again, though. And if you're enjoying the video, please don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 15. I worked for a quote-unquote girls' summer getaway, sleepaway summer camp. There was a flu bouncing around the staff for weeks. I had a temperature of like 104 and was hallucinating all night. But the camp nurse stopped taking staff because she was too busy, and I was forced to do sports field all day during one of the hottest weeks on record. They trained us in how to spot an inappropriate relationship, either between two campers or a camper and staff, and I was pretty sure I had someone who was breaking a rule. She was my supervisor, though, and even though she continually talked about disturbing things and taking bets on which ones were going to grow up not straight, and even made friends with and talked with campers on Facebook, and even though I had evidence of all of this, they kept her on because she was popular with the campers. The most eerie thing I've heard her say is they couldn't fire me if they wanted to. No kids would come to camp if they fired me. They'd go bankrupt. They switched some of the leadership in my cabin around, so I got a new co-counselor. This happened midweek because many of the staff quit. They had the flu, and it was the only way they were going to go home with enough rest. I think the camp rehired them when they were better out of fear of a lawsuit. There was something off about this new girl, and one of my kids suddenly started wetting the bed every night after the change. She had enough trouble with the other girls as it were, so when the kids asked why her sheets were getting washed, it was because she spilled a water bottle by accident. The co-counselor always laughed and made fun of her, and this change in the camper's behavior along with my co's behavior raised many red flags. I was promptly ignored by supervisory staff. A staff member had to be taken to the hospital because of severe stomach pains, only to find out that she had somehow ingested something. Hours after they got the thing out, supervisors told her if she didn't go back that day, she'd lose her job. I feel obligated to share one of my best memories, though. I had a camper who had an unnatural fascination with fire, as her mom wrote in the counselor notes. We stored that info, and for the last day of all camp sessions was a traditional candlelit vigil. When they passed out candles, it would be obvious that she didn't have one, so my co and I said there weren't enough candles for everyone, so the three of us had to go without them. One of the most caring girls in the cabin asked repeatedly, "Why does she have to go without a candle? That's not fair." And we just said no, even when she offered to share her candle. The girl apparently didn't know that we knew that she liked fire, and upon finding out was so happy, I guess, that we treated her the same as the other kids and didn't tell them what was really going on. She gave us both a hug and said she loved me. It was awesome because I felt like I truly made a difference in someone's life. Not to mention, that kid was the quiet one, the loner. She reminded me a lot of myself, and making her so happy made me feel awesome inside. I left that year because of all the raging stuff I went through that summer. I wish I could have a million moments like that, but I couldn't stand the feeling that I was participating beside some sort of cult. I was young and didn't know what to do, so I left. Haunts me still. Crap. Story 16. Restaurant worker here. Not that I didn't think it was possible, but damn was I upset. A couple came in one night, late 40s, and stayed in the bar area for hours, making out. They were hammered, and their idiot server, she doesn't work there anymore, continued to give them drinks, a big no-no. My boss was having issues with the computer systems at night and wasn't aware of the situation. I brought it upon myself to let her know because I'm a huge anti-intoxicated driving advocate. Anyway, I told my boss, not to get the server in trouble, but because it was the right thing to do. This couple was just disgusting. You could tell they had money, but apparently no class at all. The woman was practically flirting with this guy, and he was falling backwards into the window and getting tangled up in the blinds. The two of them started to leave without paying, and my boss stopped them. She had them sit on a bench outside while she called a cab. The man insisted he was good to drive even though he was stumbling and slurring. The woman was practically gone. My boss spoke very clearly and informed them that she was responsible for making sure the two of them left safely. They argued with her but eventually accepted their fate. She said she would call the cops if they tried to leave. Oh, and she forced them to pay their tab too. Story 17. The final car I sold. I worked at a bad dealer and was desperately trying to get back into recruiting. 2003, bad economy. I was in the final interview process at a place and figured that I would be getting an offer soon. I did, and was working what I hoped would be my final weekend. It was. My in-laws needed to buy a new car, and they knew I was on my way out, so they came in. I took them around and we found a car. My mother-in-law is the negotiator, and before we went in, we came up with a game plan. I told her I would hook the used sales manager in and try and see what they paid for the car on his computer, which I was able to do when I finally brought him in on the negotiation, and that I would bring him in too close. So we sat at my desk and just talked about the weather for like 40 minutes. my new job, blah, blah, blah. I go up and back to him a couple of times, basically negotiating with myself. Still have no clue what the dealer paid for the car. I finally tell him that I feel they are ready to buy today, in cash, which they were, and ask him to help me close. He pulls the car up on his computer and I see exactly what the dealer paid for it. Bingo. Now at this point, I know exactly how much the dealership paid for the car, and even after my quote-unquote negotiation, they still have $2,000 of profit they're trying to make. He comes over and I sit to his left and slightly behind him so he can't see me. My in-laws and I had agreed to let them make a $500 profit, which is fair, though we probably could have gotten it down to $100. But a dealer is all overhead and they are entitled to make a profit like any business is, just not an exorbitant one. So as he is throwing numbers at them, my MIL would quickly look over at me and I would shake my head no, until we got to our predetermined number and then she said yes. He was mad but not majorly PO'd as he still made some money. The in-laws were happy to get a car and I made a little commission. Epilogue, sold the car a few years later to CarMax and they ended up getting more for it than we thought it was worth. The benefits of a good deal. Pro tip, buying a car from anyone but CarMax is war, plain and simple. They're not your friend. They know they have you for a short period of time and try to make as much money off of you as they can. Feel no fear, they want to sell you a car more badly than you want to buy one, but they try to reverse the psychology on you and make you feel like they're doing you a favor. Don't let them. You are in control, so be merciless, anger them off by negotiating and being firm. They will still sell you the car and call you a schmuck when you leave, and who cares? They will make it back and then some on someone who has no idea how to negotiate. Also, don't be a schmuck. If you have bad credit, do not go in on a Saturday and take half of the sales guy's day. You literally just took money out of his pocket by doing so. Let them know right away your credit is a bit shaky and have the manager run a report while you are out looking at cars. Another inquiry when you have bad credit is not going to make that big of a difference. If you do have good credit, just lie and tell them that your credit union offered you a 3.5% interest or whatever the low rates are. They'll try and match it or beat it to get you to finance with them. I would tell this to my customers all the time if they told me they had solid credit. I could have given two cares as I never got a piece off the back end and the finance guys are major schmucks. Story 18. A woman came into my coffee shop 30 seconds before closing one night. We were walking towards the door to lock it at that moment. She pushes past us and makes a beeline for the restroom, doubles back, grabs a key, and sprints in. She's carrying a Pomeranian. Anyways, we can't lock the doors or start serious closing tasks, particularly breaking down tills until she's out. We're fielding people trying to come in and get coffee who won't believe we're closed because the door is still open. 15 minutes pass and my supervisor goes to knock on the bathroom door. Suddenly, we hear the dog go off like mad. Yip, 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 she says. Yip, yip, yip. My supervisor didn't realize until then that there was a dog and he started to flip his mind. Eventually, it's half an hour after closing and she opens the bathroom door and sprints out of the store. I go in to check the damage and the toilet is overflowing all over the floor, stuffed completely full of paper towels. There's a mess everywhere. We do a quick search for anything, but there aren't any. The floor is oddly damp and the whole woman's room smells bad. After unclogging the toilet, a process that took a little over 5 minutes, we concluded that the dog was spooked by us knocking on the door and making a mess on our floor. The next 15 minutes and the room's entire stock of paper towels was spent trying to wipe it up. She tried to flush them all, hence the toilet overflow. Now we hide our bathroom keys 5 minutes before we lock up. Story 19. I used to work at a shoe store, a Foot Locker, and one day a former player of the Green Bay Packers came into the store. The store wasn't busy, so I was the only associate on the sales floor. After repeatedly being sent to the back stock to get a different style shoe, I started complaining. Would this guy make his mind up already? My concerned manager, that was in back stock doing some paperwork, decided to pop out on the floor and make sure everything was okay. He is an avid Packer fan, by the way. When all of a sudden he becomes starstruck and gets all excited and starts asking the dude if everything was cool and if he should need anything, just to let him, the manager, know. Seconds later, the customer sent my manager to the back stock with me. My manager was all like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, that's a Packer player. I think my manager said it was Leroy Butler. Anyway, so after a minute of getting the styles and sizes the Packer requested, me and my manager came out together as we were talking about who the Packer was, and guess what? This guy took all the shoes I had previously pulled out for him to try on, walked out of the store and drove off. I said, we need to call the police and security, you know the guy's name. And my manager was all like, no way, man, he's a Packer. I ain't reporting him for anything. I raged and got a real screw the Packers attitude. A few days later, Corey Williams of the Packers, this happened in 2005, comes in with a couple other dudes that I don't recognize, and he's doing the same thing the other Packer player was doing. But this time, it's three dudes holding up 2 or 3 styles of shoes and asking for sizes between 11 to 12. So I bring the first wave of shoes, set them on the bench, unlace the first few eyelets, pull the tissue paper out of them, and hand them to whoever wanted to try them on. They walk around doing a slight bob and heel check. They all say, yeah, good fit, I like. Then they ask me for the same shoes, but in 13s, and I'm thinking, this old trick again, eh? So I politely asked for the shoes on the bench so I could put the unneeded sizes away, and Corey Williams glares at me with a how dare you look, and demanded I leave all the shoes at the bench and go fetch his other sizes, while giving me a gentle gesture to scurry along. I held my ground and apologized as we had a 6-shoe to a bench limit policy. Not really, but and I unfortunately couldn't bring any more pairs out until the unneeded sizes were put back into stock. Corey looked straight ahead for about 5 seconds, then swiftly reached into his right pocket, pulling out a wad of cash wrapped in a rubber band, and literally Nolan Ryan's that thing directly into my chest, causing the rubber band to break and cash to fly everywhere, within an arm's reach proximity, and shouting, "Brother, I got money." Completely stunned from the pain, felt like having a can of soda being thrown at me, and the sheer astonishment, I became dumbfounded. Before I could brace myself with the backstab from the impact, he was hurriedly scooping the money off the bench and off the floor and wrapping it up to the front of his shirt and scowling at me. In a matter of seconds, he and his friend kicked off the shoes and stormed out of the store. My manager was like, "Dude, what happened? What did you say?" As I was telling him the story and a few other customers in the store relived the story from their POV, we heard a violent knocking on our glass front window. It was Corey Williams holding a bag from Champs and shouting something along the lines of, "Competition gets your money now." So that's my story of the most messed up thing that happened to me at work. Oh, by the way, Foot Locker owns Champs, so at the end of the day, Champs' manager brought down Corey Williams' money to us and I deposited it in our safe. I'm starting to think Foot Locker employees need hazard pay between entitled customers and impulsive NFL players. It's a wonder anyone still works there. Story 20. As a bartender, I have to come to loathe the big drinking holidays, i.e. St. Patrick's Day and Thanksgiving Eve. I was working this past Thanksgiving Eve and the bar was packed. My boss is cheap and refused to let anyone work but myself and my 5-foot co-bartender. And this turns me into a bouncer bartender. The problem with this scenario is my coworker was IDing, but she wasn't stamping hands. I have a very unruly punk kid come down to my end, obviously overserved, and demand that I give him free drinks for the place being so packed. I calmly explain to him that he is more than welcome to leave or buy a drink. He decides that he will buy himself and his 3 friends shots. Before I give him the shots, I ask to see the stamps or IDs from the 4 of them. When none of them showed any proof, I asked them all to leave. As per law, anyone without valid ID 21 proof is not allowed at the bar. The other 3 agreed. The young man who demanded free drinks refused to leave. After a loud disagreement, he finally figured the best way to resolve the situation was to mess on me. After that, I jumped the kid and dragged him out of the bar. While I was holding him, kindly asking him if he was going to be calm, he proceeded to be more violent. When I finally had my wits together, I searched for the kid, but he was gone, and it being 2 a.m., decided I had had enough and threw everyone out. By the time I had finished closing, it was 6 a.m. I needed to go to the hospital. I got 9 stitches in my hand, had to be tested to see if I contracted anything. I didn't get home until like 9:30 a.m., Thanksgiving morning. Fast forward to 8 p.m. when I had to go open the bar for the evening. I arrived to find a town police officer sitting waiting for me. It turns out this cop is the father of the kid. He, in turn, writes me 4 citations for allowing kids into the bar and calls my boss and has me taken off for the night. The tickets cost me everything I made on Thanksgiving Eve and I lost roughly $700 from not working. Story 21. I worked as a server bartender throughout most of college. Senior year, I was working at a small pub in New Jersey. The place paid under the table in cash each night. Tips were split between whoever was working, plus a small hourly wage paid in cash. I think I got like $2 an hour as a server, $5 an hour as a bartender. And then one very cold night in December 2007, the place was quiet. The place was so small that even in the peak of summer at our busiest, there would be at most 3 servers working, plus the bartender. So needless to say, on this winter night, I was the only server on. The bartender that night was the owner, an absolute failure of managing people, a business, or his own life for that matter. In other places I've heard of that operate under the table like that, generally the owner might work but wouldn't take from the employee's tip pool. Not this guy. He took an even split like any of his employees, somewhat understandable considering how poorly he managed the place. Must not have had much of anything left to take away as profit for himself. At any rate, this freezing night I got a grand total of 0 tables over 5 hours. He had a small handful of mostly regulars sit at the bar for a few drinks. So when he sent me home, the split tips and my hourly wage totaled to a whopping $15. So I went to leave, only to discover that my sweet, super warm wool coat I had gotten from my parents the previous Christmas was nowhere to be found. The coat was clearly worth more than $15. The owner's response when I told him about this, asking if he'd seen anyone over there near my coat that night, was, "Are you sure you wore a coat tonight?" "Yes, it's about 5 degrees Fahrenheit outside. Of course I wore a coat." Went straight to campus to catch the tail end of my last fraternity chapter meeting of the semester. My last one as VP kinda had to be there. On the way back to my house, my car spun out on some black ice and went over the curb, messing up the alignment, slamming the rear bumper and trunk into a telephone pole. I know that last part had nothing to do with my job, but just really drove the awfulness of that night to a new level. Story 22. I work at an ice cream store. I've had people scream at me for accidentally putting fudge in their ice cream when they said no fudge. I've had a woman yell at me when she misread her punch card because she thought she had a free one when she was really 5 punches away. I've had people get upset when they don't watch their kids and let them put about 6 or 7 extra toppings on their ice cream and get the biggest size possible, then roll their eyes with a huff at me when they have to foot the bill. It doesn't happen very often, especially not since I quit working at the store in a bigger city. But when people get angry about stuff like that, I just think to myself, it's ice cream. More recent job wow moment is since I've started on as a housekeeper at the hospital. It actually isn't as disgusting as I thought it would be. Nurses clean up the bigger part of the mess, then we just come in and sanitize. However, I was changing a garbage can in an ER bathroom one day to find a disposable one of those sample things you put right on the toilet covered in green mess. It looked like a healthy smoothie gone wrong. If I ever get that sick, so help me. And if you liked any of these stories, here's more for you. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. I'll catch you in that video, and thanks for hanging with me on this one.